Welcome back to the Flow Performance Podcast. My name is Ricky Dan, founder of Flow Nutrition. Today we have another What's the Go episode with the one and only Mackenzie Baker. Mac is an accredited sports nutritionist with a post-grad diploma in performance nutrition and has completed a master's degree in sport and exercise nutrition. He has also recently published one of the first ever research papers in surfing nutrition, and in my opinion, he is the best in the business. In this episode, we talk about the food and dietary guidelines. Mac very effectively explains what they are, how they're created, and addresses the very commonly asked question, are they outdated? If you find it valuable, don't hesitate to share it with a mate or post it up on your Instagram story and tag the Flow Performance Podcast. Any support getting this content out there is greatly appreciated. So if you're wondering if you should actually follow the guidelines, listen to the chat.
3, 2, 1, yeah!
Right now, I am down at the beach with our very own Mackenzie Baker. Mac, it's always a pleasure to chat with you, mate.
Cheers. Yeah, not a bad day for it. Anyhow, so is the food pyramid outdated? And the answer to that is absolutely it's outdated. And I'll tell you why. Because it hasn't been a pyramid for ages, it's a freaking pie chart. So these days, in 2022, when people say the food pyramid is outdated, they clearly haven't actually looked at what dietary guidelines are, because it has not been a pyramid for a very long time. It is a pie chart, okay? Now, if we talk about the modern food guidelines or dietary guidelines, the pie chart, are they outdated? No. Okay, they are created by a team of top-level nutrition researchers and experts who are commissioned by the government to create, basically sift through the scientific literature around nutrition and health and come up with a series of practical guidelines that we as everyday people can apply to our nutrition to improve our health. Now, I just want to put a bit of a disclaimer in here and say these guidelines are population level. They are not specific to athletes, people with very high energy demands, certain lifestyle differences. They are general, they are population level. So don't jump up and down and say, oh, they have too much grains, or they have not enough carbs, or, they're not specific enough, or whatever. Just understand that they are population level, okay? So set your, you got to think about it that way. What is going to realistically be in terms of the specificity of them, okay? So don't jump up and down and get in a hissy fit because they don't fit your specific dietary requirements. Anyhow.
I don't know how to respond to that. But Mac, isn't the government out to kill us all? And isn't there a big conspiracy? So why should we trust it?
I mean, that's a narrative that people like to get amongst and really get involved with, and I can empathise with why people might think that. However, it is 2022. I think if that was really the case, we would genuinely know about it. And to me, it's really just a narrative that people create to try and push this kind of anti-establishment, anti-science type trend, and it is cool to do that, so people have even more of a reason to try and jump on that bandwagon. However, I don't think it's based upon critical, fair, objective thinking and analysis, so I don't think it's fair. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. No, it certainly does. And I guess these people who are pushing that narrative, a really common theme that I'm finding, especially on social media, is them presenting graphs and presenting data around the trends in global obesity, and them saying the world is getting more overweight by the day, and therefore it is because of the guidelines that our government is enforcing. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that is 110% bullshit, and I'll tell you exactly why. The reason for this is because the population actually does not follow the guidelines. So how can we blame the guidelines for the rising rates of obesity when the population does not actually follow them? Now, I believe the study was done in 2018, but I could be a little bit incorrect on the exact year it was conducted. But in Australia, they found that only 5% of the population consume the recommended intake of fruits and vegetables, 5%. So if only 5% are following just one component of the dietary guidelines, how can we then go out there and blame the guides for poor health outcomes, rising rates of obesity? it, again, lacks critical, objective, fair thinking, and it just latches onto these narratives, these anti-established narratives, these anti-science narratives, etc., because it's cool and it's trending, and people want to be cool and trendy and part of the cool crew, so they'll push that sort of shit, and it's just not fair. The dietary guidelines are not out there to kill us. They are not harmful. If we actually followed them, you would find that the population would be much healthier.
You mentioned early on in this episode that guidelines are great. However, they may not be specific to some populations. What sort of changes should athletic populations, let's say surfers, snowboarders, skaters, are there subtle changes that they should make to deviate just a little bit away from those guidelines?
The changes sit on a spectrum, anywhere from subtle to really significant. And it largely comes down to an individual's energy demands, or how much exercise they do, or how much movement they do, which will dictate how many calories they need to maintain proper physiological function, recovery, as well as fuel the activity that they wish to perform. So it could be, typically for athletic populations, that right off the bat, we're going to want to increase protein a little bit from what the guides are saying. And then the other thing that we're going to want to change is carbohydrate intake. Now, this might involve increasing consumption of foods with added sugar, which goes against the recommendation of the guidelines, which when it comes to grains, we should be aiming for whole grains, so high fiber options, and we should be limiting our consumption of indulgences that contain added sugar, as well as sugar-sweetened beverages. Now, in the case of high energy demand athletes, these foods are actually required to enable an athlete to feasibly or realistically be able to eat enough calories. And if they don't do this, they're going to have a really hard time eating sufficient calories to maintain, as I said, health, recovery, human function. And if you fail to meet these energy demands, you are putting yourself at risk of negative performance and health outcomes that can become quite severe. And these symptoms of what we call low energy availability, they are coined or defined as relative energy deficiency in sport, which is REDS. And yes, it can be quite serious. So for an athlete, really the number one thing is whether they're eating enough calories. And an approach that demonizes refined carbohydrates or foods with added sugar is really going to hinder an athlete's ability to eat enough food, which can really compromise their health and performance. So I guess that's two ways we would want to kind of deviate from the guides for athletic populations.
So I guess in summary, follow the guidelines and make sure you're eating enough calories. That's pretty much it for surfers, snowboarders and skaters. So, mate, thank you so much for clearing that up. Thank you for your time, and thank you for sharing your knowledge. If you guys do have any further questions, don't hesitate to send us a message on Instagram. Make sure you follow both of those accounts for loads of more helpful nutritional content. We will see you guys next time.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Flow Performance Podcast. I hope you enjoyed the chat and found loads of value that you can use to fuel more flow state in your life. If you did enjoy the content and want to support the podcast, don't forget to give it a 5-star rating, leave a review, or even better, share it to a mate, post it up on your Instagram story and tag Flow Performance Podcast. We really do appreciate any support in getting this content out into the world. So thanks again for tuning in, and we will catch you again next week.